So we talked about pushing. There's also the idea of pulling, which is where you get the stuff in the repo and pull it down. We're going to look at that probably more later. Let's talk about branches. So on your GitHub desktop, you probably have seen the word branch, and you've probably seen the word main. In Git, we talked about a history, right? You've got, I did a commit, I did a commit, I did a commit, boom. And I'm building up a history. But Git also has the idea that you can have multiple versions of the code at the same time. And so you've got one thing called a branch. A branch is any, think of it as a series of commits. Commit 1, commit 2, etc. And it's the history up to that point and on. This branch currently is usually called main. And that's kind of like what if you go to the repo, you want to see what does it look like right now. Main is what you expect to be the real code. So when you're putting code on the competition robot, generally, you should be putting the main branch on the robot. Generally. There are exceptions to the rule. There are different workflows. Generally, the main branch is going to be on the robot. But generally, you're not ever going to be writing code on the main branch. You're going to say, you know what? I'm going to create a new branch and call it, let's say we're working on an ARM. We're going to create a branch called ARM. And we're going to make commits on that branch. And so what this does is it lets people work on lets multiple people work on the code at the same time. And then what happens later, and we'll talk about this later, is this code gets bundled up and put on the main branch after you're done. And so maybe, Owen wants to work on an ARM, maybe somebody else at the same time decides, I'm going to work on a climber. And they can also be working. And they're all working at the same time. But notice the main branch is not touched. And the benefit here is the good code stays good. And what you can do is when you're testing, you can put the ARM branch on the robot when you're testing. You can put the climber branch on the robot when you're testing. And after you know that it's all good, then you can put the good code on the good branch. And then you've got it ready for competition. So that's another benefit of Git, is multiple versions at the same time. Yep.
You can also sync your code with the other branches, right?
Yep. This is a little bit more of a complex workflow, but let's say for some reason, hey, the person working on ARM needs some stuff the climber did. The stuff in the climber can go into the ARM branch. Again, whenever you can avoid that, you generally want to, but it's absolutely something Git will let you do, because to Git, a branch is a branch is a branch is a branch. So maybe, I was working on the climber, but I said, oh man, hey, we also need to work on this thing directly. So you can branch from the climber and say, oh, this is the balancer. Maybe the climbing and the balancing are different, but related. So person 2 can work on the climber, person 3 can work on the balancer. And when the balancer's done, it can go into the climber branch, and then the climber branch can go back into the main branch. So there's a whole lot of stuff you can do with it that makes it very, very powerful. So let's look at how we can do some of that. So I'm going to switch back to Windows. I'm going to open up here. And so right now in GitHub Desktop, you see current branch main. If you click this drop down, you can make a new branch. And so we'll just call this my first branch. And if you're looking for branches, it will search for them. If you don't find it, you can just click create branch. It'll say, hey, do you want to make that branch? Sure. So I've made a branch. I can go back into the code here and I can say, you know what? I'm going to make a third file. I don't want it to be empty, so I'll just say, here's some text. And again, make sure you save it. When you open GitHub Desktop back up, you'll find that file's there ready for you. Are y'all seeing that on yours? But here's what you gotta pay attention to. Right here, it tells you what branch you're on. Now, when we're doing the robot code, since I'm one of the admins for the org, I can go in and say, hey, you can't put code on main. I'm gonna make sure you can't do that to protect you from yourself. But this is a good double check. Say, hey, am I pushing this on the right branch? And I'm on my first branch, yeah. So I'm gonna say, create my third file, perfect. Commit to my first branch. Where is that change right now?
In my first branch,
It's in my first branch. Where though?
on the local.
On the local. I now again have the option to publish branch because I made a branch, but GitHub doesn't know about it. So now I can click this button and GitHub will know about it. So now if I go to GitHub and I refresh the page, I don't see my third file. Are y'all seeing that on yours too? There's no third file. Why is there no third file?
You're not
You're on the main
looking at the
branch.
branch.
I'm on the main branch. If you look right here, it tells you what branch you're on. I didn't put that file on the main branch. I put that file on my first branch. And if I switch over, boom, there's my third file. But it's only on my first branch. And so again, this is one of the benefits of Git is you've got this history and you've got multiple versions of the code at the same time so that multiple people can be working on it and making changes without stepping on each other's toes or messing up what somebody else did. And you can have as many branches as you need. They're free. They don't cost anything extra. You get it with the package. Any questions up to that point? Yep.
Exactly where do you delete and commit?
That's a much, much, much harder question. The reason being is that when you delete a commit, you are now changing the history. So if you put a commit on your local, before you push it up, you can still get rid of it. It's very easy to do. You can go to the history. You can right click on it, and there's going to be some options here to get rid of it. Once it's in GitHub, it's a little bit harder to do because that's going to require editing GitHub's history, which will require anybody else with a copy of the code editing it. So it's absolutely possible. It's just not one of the super easy things to do in Git.
So you take it, you don't publish it, you test it, and then if it does work, you can then publish.
Right. Ideally, you're testing your code before you commit it. Exactly. Yep.
Leaving it after it's committed, it's not part of the desired workflow.
So that's kind of branching. The next thing to talk about is how do you get the code from your branch into main? And so with GitHub, there's the concept of something called a pull request. GitHub calls them pull requests. GitLab calls them merge requests. They go by different names, but it's just a way to get code from one branch to another. You can absolutely also do it on your computer. I recommend avoiding that whenever possible. Let the pull request do it for you. To do this, you go to pull requests here in GitHub. Now, you're not going to be able to do it because you've only got the one branch, so just kind of watch what we're doing here. And if you've made a branch, you'll get this nice little warning say, hey, you made a branch. Do you want to do something with it? Let's assume you don't have that. I'm just going to click Create Pull Request, New Pull Request. And you've got base and compare. Base is main, compare is main. There should be no difference between the two, right? The base is where you want the code to end up finally. When you're doing a pull request, most of the time, that's going to be main. Compare is where's the code coming from. So where's our code coming from?
My first branch.
My first branch. And when you do that, it's going to compare the differences. And on this page, you're going to verify, hey, this is what I want. You're going to create the pull request. You can give it a name. I'm going to give it a name. I'm just going to say demonstrating branches. I'm going to create the pull request. So with GitHub, you can build in some checks where it'll say, hey, your code's good, your code's bad. We're not going to worry about all that right now. What's important is you can go to this Files Change tab, and you can see the differences. And what's going to show you is anything in green is something that you're adding. Anything in red is something you're taking away. So in this case, we're adding my third file with the text. Here's some text. And so there's nothing wrong with that. I like it. I'm going to merge the pull request. So I'm going to click the green button. I'm going to confirm the merge. Here is what's nice. If you have a bunch of commits on this pull request, it's going to bundle them up into one commit and put them on the main branch, depending on how you get it set up. You can change this text here. I usually don't. I usually leave it as it is. Confirm merge. All right, and then it's merged. The code is now in main. And I can delete the branch. Personally, I like to delete my branches because I don't need them anymore, but we'll leave it alone for now. So if I go to code, I'm going to see my third file is now in main. You'll see that on yours. So I'm going to go into Visual Studio Code. I see my third file, but I also notice I'm still on my first branch. So I'm going to switch over to main. So I'm back on main now. I'm going to go back into my repo, and what do we notice? How many files are in my repo?
2.
But GitHub says there's 3. And I'm on the main branch. So what gives? What was our problem before? If we added a file, committed it,
You have to push it.
I had to push it. But this code change is in GitHub, so I don't want to push it. I want to pull it. But we don't have the word pull in here. We have the word fetch. So fetch is a special word in GitHub. Fetch means, hey, I want to know about what GitHub knows about. Because you make changes on the local, you make changes on the remote, they get out of sync. Fetch just says, hey, I want to know what GitHub knows. So when I click fetch, it says, hey, I want to know what GitHub knows. But if I look in here, I still don't have it. Because knowing what GitHub knows doesn't give me the changes. It just lets me know there are changes. Because now I've got a button here that says pull origin. When I click on this, that's going to pull down what GitHub has. And now we see our third file. And I'm back on the main branch. Right? So that's an example of kind of like a start to finish, making changes on a branch, getting them into GitHub, doing a pull request, getting them back. Any questions through that process? Yeah.
I didn't catch how you made it so the third file was no longer on the main branch.
So before I made the file, I went into GitHub Desktop and I typed in, I'll do my second branch. And I made a new branch. So now when I go in, and if I were to make a fourth file, I'll just give it some text. I've got it here and I see that I'm on my second branch. So when I make this change, when I make this commit, it'll show up in the other branch, but it won't show up in main. So when I commit it, I do that, commit, publish. And if I switch back to main, it's not showing up here anymore. If I open up GitHub and I go back to main, it's not showing up in main. But if I switch from main to my second branch, now it's in there.
That makes sense. Okay.
Good. Any other questions on that process?